Hi, I'm Joe, an HSP guide. Today I'd like to talk about why highly sensitive people HSPs have low self-esteem and how we can break free from that cycle. Because HSPs have a more heightened nervous system, many struggle deeply with lack of confidence, unconsciously blaming themselves over small details of everyday life. But this isn't because you have a weak personality. So in this video, I will unravel the structural reasons why HSPs tend to lose confidence and share some practical mindsets you can start adopting today. So by the end of this video, the tendency of blaming yourself should feel lighter. So let's get into it now. Number one is the reason why HSPs end up with low self-esteem. When we look at the underlying mechanism, the reason is actually very clear. Being highly sensitive is something you are born with, so you've spent your life being overly considerate of others since childhood. The reason you end up overthinking others is related to a brain system from birth that makes you highly responsive to stimuli and deeply process information. Scientifically, this is called sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. Consequently, HSPs are wired to overanalyze the subtle dynamics of their social interactions, and being overly considerate of others creates situations where your own opinions simply get buried. When your opinions are left unexpressed, you end up suppressing your thoughts, making it harder to communicate what you truly feel. I'm also a highly sensitive person, and since childhood, my siblings had no problem speaking their minds, but I was always constantly hyper-aware and worrying, how will they react if I say this? And as a result, I couldn't express myself well to my parents or those around me, and I always ended up suppressing my true feelings. And just going through daily life like this, I unconsciously started feeling that others were always right and I was wrong, and I gradually lost confidence in my own opinions. In society, the majority of people seem to express their opinions effortlessly and steer their lives in directions they want. This leads HSPs to assume that everyone else is simply better equipped to handle life than they are. This triggers an inferiority complex, resulting in a continuous loss of self-confidence. Therefore, it's a habit from childhood that has caused you to lose your confidence in this way. So as a baseline, it's not that HSPs lose confidence because of a specific event. If we misunderstand this point, HSPs especially tend to fall into a loop of self-blame. That's why it's so important to first understand that this low self-esteem is simply something you carried since you were born. Number two, now let's talk about how HSPs can build a healthy sense of self-esteem. This mechanism is actually very clear as well. It comes down to your relationships. Even if you do something you believe is right, if you face criticism from others, you naturally lose confidence. This also applies when you achieve well-earned results, but your parents, for example, fail to acknowledge them. I also had an experience like this in the past. When I was a student, I finally managed to finish a song on my computer. I was so happy and played it for my family, but from their perspective, it just didn't really resonate, so their reaction was quite flat. And because of that, I just felt lonely and disappointed. I know now that my family meant no harm, but with the accumulation of things like this, you unconsciously start to believe things like, even if I share this, they won't be happy anyway, or maybe I'm just not that capable. But as time went on, things changed. From my late 20s, I began working professionally as a composer and lyricist. Later, as my music YouTube channel grew, I received an offer and ended up releasing a song through Universal Music Japan. So in other words, it wasn't necessarily that my song back then was bad. Our tastes simply didn't align, and yet when the people closest to us give a flat reaction, we so easily dismiss our own abilities and potential, concluding that we have no value. That's why it's so important for HSPs to be intentional about who they let into their lives. People who constantly try to act superior or who dismiss your sensitivity as being soft end up draining your energy. If you stay around them, your confidence will naturally keep eroding. Instead, when you surround yourself with people who acknowledge your efforts and offer constructive advice, your confidence as an HSP will naturally begin to rebuild. In fact, investing in professional counseling is a highly effective option. It provides objective feedback in a completely safe, unbiased space, which serves as a practical tool for retuning your self-esteem. With friends or parents, their views often get filtered, leading them to say things like, "You're just being immature." That dynamic can easily trigger negative thinking. So as I've mentioned before, it's essential for HSPs to choose environments with people who don't invalidate your sensibilities, but instead accept you as you are. Number 3, consider pursuing independent learning or personal projects. Earlier, we looked at why supportive relationships matter. However, simply relying on validation from others isn't the whole picture. For HSPs, focusing on personal growth and learning at your own pace is equally vital for building true confidence. This is because in a standard professional environment, opportunity for genuine growth can easily disappear, and the constant pressure to perform often stops us from taking on new challenges. For example, I'm speaking to you like this now, but in the beginning, I couldn't really talk on camera. Following my release with Universal Music Japan, I was invited as a guest speaker to share social media insights at one of Japan's largest talent academies. It was through those gradual real-world experiences that I slowly built my confidence and track record. It really is a learned process. Beyond that, I spent time studying design, music, gradually building my actual competence. When you steadily layer these small steps over 5 or 10 years, you look back to find your life is in a completely different place. However, when you unconsciously use the label HSP to justify pulling back, telling yourself, "I'm an HSP, so I just can't do anything," it's not about others calling you weak. It's that this negative thinking loop creates a reality where you truly become unable to act. Therefore, it's crucial to view your HSP trait as a starting point for shaping your own future rather than an excuse to stop. That's exactly why learning is meaningful. It gives you the tools to redesign your life on your own terms. When I say learning, you don't need to force yourself to do a massive challenge. What matters is simply having one area you love, something you can dive into at your own pace, free from judgment of others. It could be as simple as exploring design, creative writing, or learning modern digital tools, or even watching a psychology video you might be interested in. By gradually layering these personal skills that no one can interfere with, you build a quiet sense of security, and this leads to a confidence that isn't swayed by others, and over time it grows into your unique value, naturally opening up new possibility for your future. So that's why cultivating your own unique value is something truly worth keeping in mind. Finally, number 4, maintain a humble perspective. HSPs naturally tend to be more grounded than others. Even when you've worked hard and are delivering results, you rarely feel the urge to boast or shout, "Look at how amazing I am." Of course, it's healthy to take pride in your achievements. However, for an HSP, staying humble is a vital filter. When you lose that humility, you risk developing a fake confidence, the kind that leads people to show off and act superior just to hide their insecurities. Once you cross that line, you lose your authenticity and end up just like the people you've always wanted to avoid. Today, social media often pressures us to show a larger-than-life image. Since HSPs are naturally sensitive to others, it's easy to get caught up in that trend. However, if you start to brag, you risk losing the very thing that makes you special, your deep empathy and your connection with others. And eventually, people will drift away and no one will be there to help you when you need it the most. That kind of fake confidence easily breaks apart with just one negative comment from somebody who is truly capable. An experience like that can cause deep burnout. That's why while you are slowly building your real skills, it's actually safer to keep a quiet mindset. Maybe I still have a lot to learn. As I mentioned earlier, when you keep layering these small steps over 5 or 10 years, you will build real skills. One day you will look around and realize you have naturally moved far ahead of those around you. Even then, because you stay humble and keep a quiet mindset, you will simply want to learn even more. When that happens, the world around you will naturally recognize your real skills. You will become somebody that people truly value, and you will have the freedom to choose your own path without depending on any specific company or organization. That is why I believe focusing your effort on adding value to yourself is the best way forward for HSPs. Therefore, please remember that staying humble is actually your greatest strength. You don't need to force yourself to build high self-esteem. It is more than enough to just protect that peace of mind at a comfortable level. So today we looked at why HSPs often struggle with low self-esteem and how to break out of that loop in 4 parts. Here on Sensipath, I share practical insights to help highly sensitive people, HSPs, navigate life using science and psychology that is easy to follow along. If you're looking for ways to create a life that feels lighter with your sensitivity, I'd be happy if you stay connected. So that's it for today. This was Joe from Sensipath.